I'm not going to beat around the bush, but the first entry in this reboot just wasn't for me. So going into the sequel, I was a bit iffy, so let's see how it turned out. This is Combat Overview. In this series, I go over the general controls to the game's main mechanical mechanics, who or what we use those tools on, and then seeing how it all comes together. Bit more in depth, but that's what we do. R1, we got our light attacks doing this little combo. R2s are heavy, that'll bounce them down doing a little launch. Can't do much from here, but you can continue to mash either button. You can hold triangle to power up your weapon, doing a little more damage, or do one of your weapon's unique attacks. Speaking of that, you have your axe, the Blades of Chaos, and now you have a spear. And they all can be aimed and thrown as well, and they all act as a unique projectile. On square, you can call Atreus to shoot an arrow that's on a very short cooldown, and it kind of does an insane amount of stun. So yeah, the immediate strategy is to mash lights and spam square at the same time to set up a stun glory kill in each and every fight. For defense, you got your guard on L1. Got this parry when you time it. And now we have to look out for yellow attacks. These can't be blocked, you'll be guard broken, but can only be parried. And red attacks that you can't do either, so just dodge out the way. Also, both guarding and blocking cancels animations, so you can get them out if you need to. Onto the HUD, green is health, red meter is rage, and it'll blow back nearby enemies on activation. It heals as it's on, but every attack you land will add even more health on top of that. While guarding, you have access to cooldown skills that you can swap out. Little attacks that can do some work, but it's just something you'll toss out at the start and then back to the mash loop. You get to play Atreus later on, but same thing here. You just smash lights and call his assist. Or stay back and just fire away.
Well, that was boring.
There's a skill tree thing going on, but nothing's really here, and I beat the game without even touching it, so yeah. When it comes to enemies you'll fight, you got these little lizards you'll see often. You got bigger lizards who'll stay back to spit at you. Floating eyes who will shoot at you. There's some rush down enemies here and there, but nothing too crazy. But there's enemies with shields. Double tapping your block will actually do a guard break, opening them up and then letting you do what you gotta do. Bosses are definitely better this time around. It was pretty fun fighting Thor at the start, but they followed that up by fighting an even bigger lizard or a centaur, sometimes two of the same bosses at once that we fought earlier. I was hoping they'll toss a bit more at you to get some fun bosses out of this mythology. It's not until 8 hours in when they get things going, and we do get better bosses from time to time after this that mix things up for the better. But they're all short-lived because we're dragged along doing nothing but act as a glorified camera. And that's God of War Ragnarok. And still, it's just not for me. because it refuses to let you play, and when it does, it's pretty bland. And with all the accessibility options to help people play the game, why isn't there a skip option so I can play the game? Yeah, just too many unskippable, drawn out cutscenes combined with forced walking sections that take up more than half the game's runtime. And they really want you to watch them because their focus is on making this narrative driven movie game. Now, a major problem comes from this. Since that's all they really offer, people are just going to watch the cutscenes on YouTube instead. These millions of views kind of prove my point. So why should I or anyone else waste my time and money buying your game to play it in if the unique player experience will all be the same? Instead, you're all just being filtered into the same crawl spaces and being railroaded from cutscene to cutscene. To me, this is all just time wasting fluff for anyone looking to play something. All it really did was make me annoyed and give me a lot of free time to type this as a cutscene plays in the background. And I know God of War has always been an adventure action game, the adventure part taking front and center stage. New God of War does the same, but definitely leans more into its story, with full motion cap actors in empty rooms. And in my experience, it just brings the game down to a screeching halt, more times than once. The first game in this reboot is a huge offender of that, and when you add its repeat bosses too, it just really creates a monotonous experience. And compare that to the original God of War, the bosses were actually different. The Hydra had you multitask platforming and sticking their heads on spikes. The mechanical bull, where you gotta hit him with harpoons to break him down. Like the original games were way more better at giving off the adventure feeling because you played a part in them at least. Because that's why we play games, right? To play them, not to passively watch as a spectator. Even later games kept the same unique set pieces that you played a part in. Like the 1v1 fighting game boss fight with Zeus, or the first person section at the end. First boss in God of War 2 where you're chasing this huge statue brought to life. Then to make your way inside it, doing some platforming or combat, all at the same time to make the single encounter last an entire stage, and get multiple distinct interactions with it. And what do we fight in New God of War again? Just the same troll from the beginning to end. Plus the world of God of War 1 was more enjoyable to play in and experience, starting by running through the collapsing city, going through a gauntlet platforming where you actually play it yourself. Kind of reminds you of what you'll see in classic platformers like Shinobi 3 and Rocket Knight, or when you're climbing the back of Kronos, or in the desert where you gotta do some soul searching, or the combat sections in the maze having you duck and dodge this rolling pillar as you platform and solve puzzles, all while fighting. And going across the mountain, seeing Ares fighting a literal army below to see this god amongst men, which foreshadows to another unique boss fight when you become as powerful and literally go toe to toe with the God of War Ares, the main bad who played a part of getting you into this mess. So story and gameplay actually help each other out, making a huge moment, and it pays off well. Like this is an adventure action game, and a damn good one too. And these new God of Wars just don't cut it for me. They don't make this mythology interesting to experience. They became too hand-holding, refusing to actually let you play or have any control. You can't do puzzles yourself or even do a simple jump either. What went so wrong where this is even considered a game of the year contender? It doesn't even have the confidence in its player base to control anything, as if you're toddlers. So looking at the games that came before in its own franchise, gameplay wise, they make these reboots even more shallow in comparison. Just the intros alone are telling enough. God of War 2 started out with the multi-phase boss that stretches across an entire stage that acts as a hype tone setter, but also this tutorial for combat and platforming, all in one, creating this memorable intro that still left an impression on me years later, because it combines so many layers of game design to get you hyped to play a video game. While new God of War 2 might as well be a virtual roller coaster ride having you sit still and just control the camera. Only. Very limited in comparison to a nearly 20-year-old game. Yeah, don't worry, this does a good job too setting its tone. Gets you really find out what gameplay you'll see from here on out. Yeah, pretty soon you'll find out that they're out to make a slow-paced movie, which means you can't take 2 steps before another cutscene takes control yet again. Now let's look at the intro of God of War 3, the finale of the original trilogy. Right from the start, we're leading this charge on Gaia's back to confront the gods of Olympus with this army of titans. What an intro. And for the finale of these reboot games is Ragnarok. This huge cataclysmic event. It started with a little bumpy roller coaster ride. Just really think about it, how the energy behind these games are null and void. And just because it's a narrative-heavy action game, it doesn't mean you can't push it to fun places, but these games just take themselves way too serious. Most likely to be seen as this respectable example of modern gaming, but they just come off as boring. Let's look at Asura's Wrath, for example. Now that's a top-notch movie. That should be their source of inspiration if they're going to continue down this path. Just make it exciting to watch. Let's have over-the-top moments where you get to appreciate the camera work, the framing, and the animations. And comparing Asura's amazing cutscenes to new God of Wars doing little effort in this department. This is their main focus now, apparently, too, so yeah. Now, I know I went off topic of combat, but that's because I know what God of War is. Well, what it was, at least. So that's why I didn't check its merits as an action game too much, because that was never really its thing. It aims to be a bombastic adventure, but both games in this reboot series are just fine. Kind of just by the numbers, standard AAA fare. Aims to put a tiny surface layer drop of everything. There's nothing wrong for enjoying them. They do what they gotta do, and that's to make a very easy pick up and play experience that appeals to the largest audience possible, to make a return on their time and investment for development and that huge ad campaign they blast you constantly. And with that insane amount of money on the line, they have no choice but to play things extremely safe, have little to no creative risk. The most they can put effort into is writing the dialogue. I did like how Atreus was having this back and forth with himself, saying what he wants to say to Kratos, but Atreus knows how Kratos will respond. And doing that actually has him understand his father's point of view. I can appreciate these things. They actually have some real nice talks. And the last 3 hours start to finally feel like something here that's worth playing for yourself. With its amazing set pieces, the back-to-back boss fights, you get to actually fight more without being interrupted. And the cutscenes at the end are very touching and you can't deny their impact. It all came together by the end, leaving on a really good high note. But they can't fix the past 17 hours that came before it, of just holding forward with little to no control before this final mission where things finally got good. I kinda just ragged on these games pretty harsh, but it's true. I cover games by looking at its gameplay. And just like how Atreus can kinda see where Kratos is coming from, trying to see where I'm coming from too, I play games to play them and have control of this certain playstyle to experience the game through its mechanics and how they build upon it. But gameplay in Ragnarok is severely lacking and at times feels completely absent. And I fully understand and can appreciate what they're trying to do nowadays, but from what they're showing me, maybe video games isn't for them anymore. Maybe it's time to focus on movies and shows instead. I'm so curious where they take it next because it's God of War. It's a classic franchise that I've been a fan of since day one, and of course I want to see where things go next for Kratos. But with this new direction not continuing what I like so much about the first games that came out on the PS2, or even match the creative quality that stood out to me of another cinematic action game, well, it just didn't click for me. And yeah, they just need to make these adventures worth being a part of, either with more player control, with actual platforming or a little more involved combat. And if gameplay isn't their goal anymore, then put some effort to form some kind of narrative choices along the way to make the story worth experiencing yourself, to form your own path. You can even bring the karma system back that we've seen a lot during the 7th generation. Just something to spice it up a bit. So for fans of action games or fans of wanting to play video games, I say skip it. Your controller's going to be sitting there doing nothing while you're on your phone. When the stars align where you actually have to pick it up, it'll be holding forward with no agency and filled with backseating AI that can't imagine someone playing it because they're playing you instead. And if you still want to have Ragnarök on your console, I say save your money and watch a Let's Play instead, because both you and the person recording it have the same level of involvement. Just pause and play. Have fun.